Hey, what's happening? What's happening? In the last video, we talked a little bit about compound interest and the importance of understanding that concept of compound interest in order to build wealth over the long term. And I always give the metric of making $1 million, right, in an account, in a brokerage account or a Roth IRA account, which I really like and advise and recommend you save toward. So first idea here I wanted to talk about around compound interest is, and really a tool I wanted to share is from the investor.gov financial tools, and you could Google that. It's investor.gov/financial tools dash calculator, and financial tools financial dash tools dash calculator, and you could just experiment with that. I'll put a link up to that in the description for the video, and then I'll display that so you can get on there and just experiment with it. And I just wanted to talk about a couple different scenarios. If you could set aside $500 a month, and that's really the gold standard. That's a lot. That's a lot, especially for someone who's younger. And one of the main goals of this channel and the purpose of me doing these videos is to share with someone who's maybe in their teens or early 20s and getting started saving and investing, so that they could build that into $1 million over time. And what I like to call a get rich for sure scheme, not a get rich quick scheme, but a way to get rich and build wealth over long term for sure. So if you could start with $500, and that's a lot. That's a lot for a young person to set aside. But $500 is the legal limit for the Roth IRA, which I'm going to advise. But the math works in any kind of brokerage, any kind of investment account, a 401k, a 403b, an individual, any kind of brokerage. Any kind of account, the math is going to work. I'm going to show that to you. But the idea here is that if you had $500 per month for 40 years and you were invested in the right funds, like I said, I'll go into detail on some of those funds that you could be invested in. If you had a 10% growth rate, $500, which is the legal limit, that would be $6,000 a year. And then, of course, at age 50, that goes up. But if you did that for 40 years, that's going to end up being just in this simple tool. And you could get on the calculator yourself and look at the tool, investor.gov /financial tools dash calculator. And you could just Google investor compound interest calculator, several different ones, but I like that investor.gov one the best. It's kind of easiest to use. So that's going to end up being $2 million, a little over $2 million, $2,600,000 over 40 years. If you were invested in funds that were making 10% growth, $500 a month. So that's a lot of money, right? So another metric, and you could experiment yourself, but on this investor tool, on a compound interest calculator tool, if you had $300 a month, and so it's a little bit less, maybe more accessible to have $300 set aside that you're investing. If you had $300 at 11%, so it's a little bit less it's a little bit more on the percent, but less per month. If you did that for 35 years, that ends up being $1,200,000, $1,241,000. So over 35 years, less time, a little bit more on the interest side, and there are funds that you can make that amount in, and I'm going to talk about a Roth IRA, especially why I recommend that. That would end up being $1,200,000, so still pretty good amount there to build that wealth, and just set aside in $300 you might not even notice. Another amount, just running another metric and another example to show you, would be if you had $110 set aside. Now, I bumped up the interest here, and it makes a big difference, even if it's 1% interest. If you had 12% interest and you had $110 set aside, again, for 40 years, so you did this for 40 years, and you could experiment yourself in the investor.gov calculator or any compound interest calculator, that ends up being over $1 million, $1,076,000 over 40 years, $110. So my advice would be, and if I had to do all over again, starting young, starting in my teens, starting in my 20s, I would try to set aside as much as I possibly could, whether that's $10, $20, $50, but the simple metric, the simple math, and again, I'll put a link to the investor calculator, the compound interest calculator in the description of the video, and display that for you. And you could just do this math, $110. That's it. That's not much. Maybe you start off with 10 or 20, get up to 100, and then over time you build that up to 200, 300, then 500. If you can do that, the key is starting young, and you do that over time. And Warren Buffett gives the example, and I'll talk about this in another video. He always talks about a snowball rolling downhill, and the key is to have time and length. And so if you're building a snowball, and think of that analogy, snowball rolling downhill, that's kind of like that wealth, that compound interest. You just let compounding do the rest. If you can start young, setting aside $500. Again, I recommend the Roth IRA because that's not going to be taxed. The profits aren't taxed. And then when you take out, at age 59 and a half, you take out anything in that Roth IRA afterward, you're not going to pay taxes on that either. So I'm going to talk about benefits of that. But this math works with a 401k, with a 403b, with any kind of brokerage account. The same math works, that compounding and the importance of compound interest and starting young. And if you're invested in the right funds, and I'm going to recommend some specific index funds to you, you can more than likely make at least 10%, maybe up to 15%, and every bit counts, every bit matters. And I'll go into more detail on that in the next video. Until the next time, be peaceful.